So, welcome once again to all of you, and thank you for joining us for this first webinar in a series of webinars related to the 2024 election cycle. Today's webinar is titled Welcoming at the Polls, How Poll Workers Ensure Accessible Elections for All. My name is Anthony Salas. I am the events director with Welcoming America. And before we do get started and I turn it over to our speaker today, I do want to just go over a quick housekeeping items with you. The webinar is being recorded and it will be shared with you probably within the next couple of days. So look for that coming your way. And it'll be going out to anyone that you know that may not be able to attend today. Everyone that's registered will get this. So if anyone asks, you're welcome to share that with them. Also, in an effort to just provide a secure and welcoming environment, any AI bots that do come into the chat to record the webinar will be removed, again, because we are providing that recording option for you. So just want to point that out in case you see anything like that in the chat. If you have any questions related to the platform, please use the chat feature. And in terms of questions that are related to the content that's being shared today, if you can use the Q&A function, that would be great. If you prefer to use the chat function, you're welcome to use that as well. So a couple of options for you there to engage with our speaker and the content that she's going to be presenting. And speaking of our speaker, it is my pleasure to introduce you to Marta Hansen, who is the National Program Manager with Power the Polls. And Power the Polls is a nonpartisan initiative to recruit the next generation of potential poll workers to ensure safe, fair, and accessible elections for all voters. Marta joined Power the Polls in 2022, managing the broad coalition of partners to mobilize over 275,000 potential poll workers leading up to the midterm elections that were held that year. Marta's career has focused on building versatile and high-impact partnerships and coalitions, including in-issue advocacy, campaigns, and higher education at the local, state, and national level. So it is very exciting for me to introduce Marta to all of you. I am going to stop my screen sharing and Marta is going to take over. And Marta, I turn it over to you.
All right, thank you so much. And I'm so thrilled to be here with all of you today. I've got my slide up on the screen, so Anthony, please interrupt me if you for some reason can't see it. But I am, as you heard, I'm Marta Hansen, she, her pronouns. I'm the National Program Manager with Power the Polls, and I'm super excited to be here with all of you today talking about how we welcome America at the polling place and how poll workers welcome voters to the polls. So thrilled to be here with all of you. A trivia question that I will ask all of you to start is think about how many poll workers you think it takes to run an election in a presidential year, the November general election. Total nationwide, how many poll workers do you think it takes? So think of a number and then pay attention throughout the presentation to see if you can find the answer. So what we're going to cover today is threefold. Why poll workers matter, how we at Power the Polls recruit poll workers, and how you can recruit poll workers as part of welcoming America. I'm really hoping that you leave with an understanding of the opportunities available to immigrant communities regarding civic participation, specifically as poll workers, and trying really to connect the dots on the importance and impact of specifically immigrant participation in elections as poll workers, and then also with some tips and resources for how you can get involved and what that next step is if you're interested in either yourself signing up and or engaging your own community. First and foremost, though, we're going to rewind to the summer of 2020 when, as you may recall, there was a huge nationwide poll worker shortage in the primary elections in kind of those late spring elections. Dallas had 10 polling locations closed at the last minute because there were not enough poll workers. We saw similar problems in Wisconsin. And it was a really strong passive force that was preventing people across the country from accessing the ballot box. And when polling places are closed, that tends to happen in lower income communities, communities of color. So it really is a question of access when there are not enough polling places not enough poll workers to keep polling places open. So when we were seeing that national shortage, that is when Power the Polls was born. So we are a national nonpartisan initiative on a mission to recruit the next generation of poll workers who will ensure safe, secure, and healthy and accessible elections for all voters. You can see some of our founding partners on this slide here: Civic Alliance, which coordinates with businesses, Pizza to the Polls, MTV and Comedy Central, Work Elections, a whole bunch of both businesses and nonprofits who really banded together in this true effort of coalition to recruit the poll workers that were needed. Our vision at Power the Polls is that voting can be an accessible, positive, and also empowering experience for every single voter, and that every election administrator has the election workers that they need, including with the necessary tech and language skills to ensure elections run smoothly. I know at Welcoming America, y'all talk a lot about the idea of belonging, right? Like, how do we integrate immigrants into the broader community, right? And how are communities integrated into broader social fabric? And we really see poll workers as the face of making that happen when we think about democracy and elections. So back in 2020, after the launch, we had a 4-month sprint to election day, and we recruited over 700,000 prospective poll workers in that time, with over 400 business and nonprofit partners. And as a result, we staffed all jurisdictions that we had tracked and saw no widespread shortages of poll workers during early voting or on election day. So a pretty significant win. In 2022, we relaunched leading up to the midterms and took a more targeted approach where, instead of casting as wide a net as possible nationwide, we tracked about 600 jurisdictions with the highest needs. Some of these jurisdictions just needed bodies. Some of these jurisdictions specifically needed certain language speakers or people who had comfort levels with tablets or iPads, but basically the jurisdictions with the highest need. And we targeted our recruitment there. As a result, in 2022, we activated nearly 300,000 potential poll workers. So not quite as many as 2020, but still a pretty big amount. And we also tracked just under 600 of those priority jurisdictions that I mentioned. And a number that I'm really proud of from 2022 is that 56% of people who signed up were in one of those top 10% high need priority jurisdictions. So 60% of signups in 10% of the high need in the most high need jurisdictions. The targeted approach really worked. In 2022, we also recruited bilingual poll workers speaking over 25 languages, and we also shared about 1,200 lists directly with election administrators of potential poll workers where the needs of potential poll workers in their jurisdictions. And I see a couple of folks commenting in the chat, so I just opened that folder so I can track questions that come in. So why do poll workers matter? Poll workers are the folks who power our democracy. I would say that elections come down to poll workers, and there is a direct link between poll workers and a functioning electoral system. Without poll workers, people cannot vote. Without everyone voting, democracy doesn't function as it should. And again, if you think about long lines of folks and who that disproportionately impacts, it really does come down to poll workers and being able to keep polling places open. I would also say that when we think about increasing civic participation, especially for immigrant communities, serving as a poll worker is one of the best ways to give back in your own community, and to the community at large in terms of creating that welcoming and empowering space at the polling place. And this is where I'm answering that trivia question that it takes on average about 1 million poll workers to run an election in a general election of a presidential year. So there's your fun fact and why poll workers matter so much. So what do poll workers actually do? Poll workers are the people who enable the nonpartisan process of democracy. Poll workers are the folks who keep polling places open on election day and during early voting. They're the folks who, show up at 5 a.m. to put up the signs and set up the tables, make sure people know where to go. And they're the ones who close down at the end of the day. Throughout the day, they prevent long lines at the polling place. They ensure technology functions as it should. They hand out those I voted stickers, check voters in. They also provide voters with information in their native language. And overall, they make every voter's experience a positive and empowering one. So really, poll workers are the face of democracy. I would actually say serving as a poll worker is one of the most effective nonpartisan activities that any everyday person like you or I could do in support of our democracy. I will also say being a poll worker is different from being an election administrator. So election administrators are the full-time staff who work for the county clerk office or work for the local jurisdiction. Poll workers, it's like a one-day job on election day and or during early voting. The other distinction that I want to draw is that poll workers and poll watchers are also pretty different. So poll workers are called election workers or election judges in some. It really depends from state to state. But poll workers, like the roles that we are talking about, are hired and trained by their local election administrators. Poll workers also help polling places run smoothly on election day. As I mentioned, they're really kind of the staff for the polling place. So they're the ones checking in voters, handing out ballots, handing out I voted stickers, as I said, really supporting voters throughout the day. Poll workers are also paid in most cases, and this can really range from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, but it can be anywhere from $150 to like $350 for the day. Sometimes there's additional payment for the training that you go through. So that's really kind of on the left side of this slide, what poll workers do and what it is that we are really talking about today. On the other hand, the other folks that you might have heard of that might be at the polling place as well are poll watchers. And these are outside folks. These are also known as election observers. And these election observers are often appointed by political parties, candidates, or other outside groups to observe election activities. And the rules do vary pretty widely state by state, but generally these poll watchers are prohibited from actually interfering in the process, apart from reporting any issues. So again, really thinking about three distinct roles, right? The full-time election administrators, who are the professional staff, poll workers, which are what we're talking about today, this workforce of 1 million people who can show up on November 5th to help elections run smoothly. And then the poll watchers are kind of those outside groups that might be recruited to just observe what's going on. And again, drop any questions on the chat, or happy to kind of do some disambiguation through all of this. So how to become a poll worker? One of the biggest calls to action that I have for all of you today is to become a poll worker. Again, as we think about serving immigrant communities and how immigrants can become more involved in their local community, stepping up to serve as a poll worker in an upcoming election is really great for a couple of ways. It's really great to see how the process of elections actually work in your home area. It's a great way to meet your neighbors. Polling places are often at a local school or a local rec center or a local faith community like building. So it's a great way to meet your neighbors and give back. So if you're interested in becoming a poll worker, here is how. So first and foremost, you can go to powerthepolls.org, and we have a special link that is powerthepolls.org/welcoming America, which Anthony just dropped in the chat. When you click on that link, you will be invited to type in your name, email, phone number, and zip code. And then once you hit submit or sign up, it will direct you wherever you are in the country to your local poll worker application and information for your jurisdiction. So let's say you live in Washington, D.C., you'll see a page like you see on the screen here. Or if you live in Little Rock, Arkansas, or Miami, Florida, or I don't know, Los Angeles, California, like wherever you live, it will pull up the local information for your jurisdiction. And that's where you can really learn more about what being a poll worker entails in your area. You'll learn about what the requirements are. Some jurisdictions have shifts, so you can work like a morning shift or an evening shift. As you can see on the screen in Washington, D.C., you have to work for the full day, which is about 6 a.m. to 9 p.m., so it really is a long day. You also see how much you get paid. So here in Washington, D.C., as you see on the screen, it ranges from $250 to $300 for election day. There's also extra money for shifts for early voting, and student workers get paid. Other information that we'll share with you is age requirements. So this is a great thing to know for the younger folks in your life. If you have kids yourself, or if you have younger folks in your community who maybe you're 17 or 18, so not yet eligible to vote themselves, they might be eligible to serve as a poll worker. We have groups of high school students who show up and vote, or talk with young folks who do a lot of translation for their parents, who then serve as a poll worker and get paid to be a translator for voters. So it really does depend on your jurisdiction what the requirements are. But when you sign up through Power the Polls, we will direct you to where you need to be, and then tell you all the information that you need to know. So how to actually become a poll worker. So this is what the whole process looks like. So first you sign up at Power the Polls, which maybe you just did, or you can do later today. We'll direct you to your local jurisdiction's application. And then the really critical piece here is for you to complete the application. It takes about 10 seconds to sign up with Power the Polls. It might take 10 minutes to complete your local application, but completing your local poll worker application is the way to let your local election administrator know that you are interested, and that you want to serve as a poll worker. So the next step is to be both patient and persistent. So getting placed may take time. Some election administrators work on, very different timelines. So it might be a couple of weeks or even a couple of months until you hear back. If it's been a couple of months, we always say you're welcome to reach out to your local election office and see if they have any timelines. The other thing that I'll add here in terms of this patience piece is I like to think of poll working also similarly akin to something like jury duty, which if you've been called for jury duty, you know that sometimes they call 150 people just to end up with 12. And sometimes it's a day of like sitting around all day. And you're not, maybe you're not even called up, but it's really important that they have a huge pool of people from which to draw to get to those 12 people that they need. So we want as many folks as possible to sign up. So election administrators have a huge pool from which to draw for folks so they can place you, maybe in your own precinct, or like be, really particular about where they place you. So the third step of becoming a poll worker, if you are selected by your local election administrator, you will need to complete all official trainings required by your local election office. So something to know is that your election office wants you to be prepared. They have tons of trainings. They make sure that you are really well equipped and really well prepared for knowing what the rules are in your particular area and what you need to know so that you can feel really empowered and successful to help voters in your area. The one other thing I'll add is that you can take advantage of extra training and resources. This is where Power the Polls also comes in. We have a whole bunch of resources, many of which you can see on our website. um, that include things like 25 questions to ask during your poll worker training, or things to remember to pack on election day, or how to deal with common situations at the polls that might arise. If someone goes to the wrong jurisdiction or isn't actually registered, or if there's like a rabble rouser nearby, kind of like who to call and how to support and how to know what the rules are in your particular area. So I promise you, you will show up and feel prepared on election day when the time comes. And then last but not least, if you are selected as a poll worker, you have a huge responsibility. You are, in fact, the face of democracy for voters on election day. So it's really important to show up, know that your neighbors are counting on you. One of the reasons at Power the Polls that we do focus a lot on so aggressively recruiting and getting those big numbers is that every year we do hear from election administrators that there is turnover, or there are folks who say, my kid got sick at the last minute, so I can't show up on election day, or I got sick, or I broke my ankle, or some, life happens, right? Stuff comes up. So it's really important to commit, like follow through on your commitment if you can, and also like stay ready and willing and waiting for that 11th hour phone call if you haven't heard, but if you're still available. And I'm happy to answer more questions about this if helpful. So that's the process, like why a poll worker is important and how to actually become a poll worker. So now with, thinking about this partnership with Welcoming America, thinking about all of you as ambassadors in your own community, I wanted to share a few takeaways of how we at Power the Polls recruit poll workers, and specifically how you can help beyond signing up yourself. So this is, wanting you to walk away with some tips and resources for how you can be ambassadors in your own community about the importance of poll workers and how other folks that you know can sign up. So a few things that we've learned and how we recruit poll workers. Number one, like the most important way that we recruit poll workers is mobilizing our partners. So working with organizations like Welcoming America that have strong coalitions. It will not surprise you to know that people respond to organizations that they trust. Right. So like if you were to get an email from Welcoming America saying, or like this invitation to this webinar saying like, hey, this is something you should consider, you're here. Right. We've seen in recent years that 70% of all poll worker signups come through one of our partner organizations. Right. Because so this is why, lifting up community leaders like you, and really like partnering with organizations that have these strong networks saying, okay, you care about immigrant communities, like this is why poll workers matter. This is why poll workers matter to these particular communities. So really the invitation here is for you to take what you've learned today, become an ambassador, sign up yourself, and also invite other folks that you know to be involved civically in this way. And help, mobilize folks in their own community as well. The next thing that we really focus on doing in the how we recruit poll workers is uplifting positive experiences. As if you're reading the news, I know you've probably seen a lot of the kind of narratives around kind of threats and concerns around election turnover. A lot of that is targeted at those professional election administrators that I mentioned. So most of that is like not at all targeted at specifically poll workers, which are what we're recruiting for here. And in fact, poll workers, we have found overwhelmingly find their experiences to be both positive and empowering, and they want to come back and serve again. We did a survey after 2022. 95% of poll workers told us they had a positive experience, and 88% told us that they want to serve again. So this is another way that our invitation to you is really uplifting the positive stories to show that actually democracy usually on the local level runs really smoothly. And election day one runs really smoothly. It's a way to be involved and give back and help, as I've said, make sure that those polling places are those like positive, empowering, welcoming experiences for the voters who are showing up on election day. And the other way that we recruit poll workers is sharing with you some of the key messaging that we have learned in terms of what actually motivates people. So I would say overall, the top motivator for signing up is that people want to understand and contribute to the election process. And I would say, when we think about how immigrant communities specifically are really like integrated and tapped in and very much, contributing members, as they've always been and continue to be, once again, contributing to elections, contributing to democracy is a really strong motivator all across the board. So serving as a poll worker is a great way to both understand and be involved in the election process. It's a lot of folks see it as part of their civic duty, democratic responsibility. It is a way of getting paid with some groups, especially folks who have more flexible schedules or students. It's nice to know that you're getting paid to help your neighbors. So we try to have messages that support all of these different calls to action or reasons why people might feel motivated. And the invitation is always to kind of take this and tailor it to your local community, and what resonates most, or to test different things and see what works. Since you're on this call with me, you also get a view of the back end of what the full process of recruiting poll workers look like from the Power the Polls perspective. So first and foremost, we do general outreach and education. So that's calls like this one, right? Raising awareness, having those press stories, trying to educate folks about, poll workers really matter. They're the face of our democracy. And then also, trying to get folks to sign up, getting them to complete their local application. Every once in a while, or actually quite frequently, we'll have a specific need identified. So this is either an election administrator reaches out to us and says, hey, I could really use people speaking these languages, or hey, I could really use, people in this particular area. And that's when we also do targeted activation. So I might reach back out to Anthony and say, hey, Anthony, the area around, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania needs a bunch more people. Can you help? And so he might, reach out to any folks in the Welcoming America community in the Pittsburgh area saying like, hey, Pittsburgh really needs folks for the primary. Can you help? So we do try to do targeted activation in addition to that general outreach. And then where we are able to, we share lists directly with election administrators and just continue to push people on our list and remind them, like, even though you signed up with us, you still have to complete your official application. So that's how we push folks through. A couple of things that I'll share with this audience in particular is I mentioned that we are able to get really, really granular in the information that we put together in terms of poll worker recruitment. And so we have a tracker that we share out with our partners that includes specific needs in specific areas. So this is just a screenshot that I took of a handful of counties in the state of California that have language needs. One of our top requests that we hear across the board from election administrators is the need for bilingual poll workers. So especially, when we think about increasing access for voters who speak languages other than English as their native language, we really try to focus our recruitment on having those bilingual poll workers so we have like de facto access at the polls, right? There's a lot of, Section 203 of the Voting Rights Act, which focuses on having ballots printed in various languages. And so that's really important. And we try to make sure that we have poll workers speaking those languages as well. So based on kind of how you, for the folks listening on the call, if you are part of a community that speaks a particular language, it's really, that's like another really clear way of how having folks who speak those languages, encouraged to sign up as poll workers is a really critical part of local access. And one of the things that we launched earlier this year that I am personally incredibly proud of is a brand new bilingual poll worker recruitment toolkit that includes in-language poll worker recruitment materials in, I believe we started with 11 languages that were the most requested by election administrators last year. So this is 8 of the 11. Spanish is one that's not on here, and there's a few others, but we will share the link to this toolkit. So it's a view-only document. Yeah, Anthony just dropped it in the chat. If you click on that, bookmark it, you can download these graphics yourself, and we have text that you can copy paste as well. I see a question in the chat of the act that requires that. So it's called Section 203 of the Voting Rights Act. And if you just Google Section 203 Voting Rights Act on the, I can't remember if it's through the US Census, but it's through some like US federal government website. You can actually see what jurisdictions are like under Section 203 based on the last census. And it's, if I'm remembering off the top of my head, it's like either 5% of the population or at least 10,000 people speak a particular language. So you can see the breakdown. There's like a whole spreadsheet that you can download online for that. So we have this in-language recruitment toolkit, so that somebody sees a message in Korean that says, hey, help other Korean Americans or help other Korean speakers vote by being an election worker. And there's a few messages. So if anyone speaks multiple of these languages, just know that the color coding means it's the same message. And there's the translations and everything in our toolkit. Thank you, Anthony, for dropping Section 203 in the chat as well. All right, so how you can help. This is my call to action for you. I hope you are ready. Several things. So first and foremost, visit powerthepolls.org/welcomingamerica to sign up yourself. Again, you visiting that link will direct you to your local poll worker application, which will probably take 10 minutes or so to fill out. So fill that out right after this call. My invitation is also to tell 3 people what you learned today. Tell 3 people what you learned today and invite them to sign up too. Zaira, I see your question in the chat and I'll come back to that because that's a great question. But in terms of how you can help tell 3 people what you learned today and invite them to sign up as well, you can check out our poll worker resources at powerthepolls.org/resources to learn a little bit more about some of what we offer. Follow us on social media. On social media is where we share out where a lot of needs are. So someone in the chat mentioned being from Pennsylvania. We have a lot of poll worker needs in various counties in Pennsylvania that I believe was shared on our social media recently. So we always ask you to share that out and amplify it, or take a screenshot of the image and send an email to somebody, however you want to do that. That's really where we amplify needs. Share our bilingual poll worker recruitment toolkit. This is where we have those in-language materials that I had on the previous slide, especially if that, and you can see the other languages that we have in there. Again, it's a view-only document, but if you scroll down, there's links to the different sections throughout the document that you can see. And then last but not least, our big national day of action is Poll Worker Recruitment Day on Thursday, August 1st this year. So we invite you to mark your calendars and on that day plan to send out an email or amplify a post on social media or something to really, really help emphasize this need for poll worker recruitment. The one other thing that I realized I didn't mention is this year in 2024, we are already tracking poll worker needs in triple the number of jurisdictions than we were tracking in 2022. So this is a problem that did not self-correct in 2020. We are seeing huge widespread needs across the country, especially for bilingual poll workers. So this is pretty much wherever you are. It's a call to action that you and others in your community can step up. And then I've got a couple more I think 2 more informational slides, and then we can switch to questions. So this is also, if you want to learn more, you can always connect with us. powerthepolls.org/partners is a little bit more about our partnership. You can email us with questions, partners@powerthepolls.org. I have a great colleague named Ellen who just came on, who is managing our partners and partnership, especially kind of ramping up with new partners this year. And find us on all platforms at Power the Polls. It is not Power to the Polls, just Power the Polls. It's a bit confusing, but that is there. And then I also want to share some gratitude here. So, this is some gratitude directly from election administrators. Somebody said, thank you so much for a small community like ours. The support is really incredible. We got a call yesterday from a high school student, that she heard from one of the partner orgs. So, again, was sending out through our partners and people responding to organizations that they trust. And then it's just heartwarming to hear these testimonials from folks that about how Power the Polls is really instrumental in assisting recruitment, how folks are more than thrilled to get the poll workers from us. So really, it's pretty exciting to hear that. So that's what I've got. What I'm going to do before opening to questions is twofold. I will answer the additional question in the chat, and then I'll actually walk you all through the poll worker recruitment toolkit. And I see Ellen just dropped some posts in the chat too, which is great. Thank you so much, Ellen. So the question about is 5% the legal requirement to translate the ballot, and anything below that percentage is not eligible. I would look at the section 203 of the Voting Rights Act link that Anthony dropped in the chat. I am not a lawyer myself. It is my understanding that the legal threshold is based on the size of the jurisdiction. It is either 5% or 10,000. And I don't remember if it's like which one is less or which one is more, but that's like the general rule of thumb cutoff. I will say there are groups who work specifically on language access who work on focusing on that like 3 to 5% range, right? Where a population might not quite hit 5%, but maybe it's like 4.5%, right? Which is like still a lot. So focusing on language recruitment in those areas, and we're part of some of those coalition calls to try to also do language recruitment in those areas, in those jurisdictions with that like 3 to 5% threshold. So, but I would say check out that website to learn more, and feel free to email us at partners@powerthepolls.org if you want some additional information. And while I've got this screen shared, I am going to go over to this bilingual recruitment toolkit, which should have maintained the screen share here. So you can see this. I see some other folks still in this, which is very exciting. So yours will look slightly different just because yours will be a view only document. So this is what yours will look like. Bilingual recruitment in language toolkit here. So this has some notes on just like, like cultural differences, Mexican American Spanish versus like Spain Spanish, based on your population, always have somebody look over things, especially for more targeted areas. And then kind of being careful, copy pasting non-Roman alphabet languages. But as always, you can contact us at partners at. And so at the top here, we have a glossary, kind of like a table of context. So if you wanted to jump to Tagalog, click that, it'll pop you down here. It's easier to look in a bigger view here because that is what is, trying to rearrange my screen. Here we go. So we've got Tagalog here. So you can scroll down and see what's available. Help your neighbors vote generally is this message, get paid to protect democracy. Do you speak Tagalog, staff your local polling place, and bilingual poll workers are needed. Here is some translation that includes both the short phrases that were up above and also some longer phrases as well, in case you wanted to use that for captions or other things like that. For every group, you can also, there's a link to download all graphics. So if you click on that, it will go to a page where you can actually download all of the different links and all of the different graphics themselves, which are both in square format and also in rectangular format. So if we wanted to like scroll up, so here's for Spanish, you can see here's all of the Spanish language graphics. They'll take a second to load, but here they are. And then similarly, you can always scroll all the way back up to the top here. And again, these are the 11 languages that we have here. For Chinese, we've got a note from our translator about Mandarin and Cantonese and sort of where things are used for folks just to know. And then, as always, if anything is, we had this double checked by a couple of different, we had it translated professionally and then all of them double checked. And always, if there are ever any flags that you find or things that you would do slightly differently, always feel free to share that feedback back with us. I would say everything that we create is from things that partners have specifically requested. And on that note, the one other thing I will share is our partner toolkit, which we are in the process of making some updates to, but this is our partner toolkit that you will also see as a view-only document. We can drop this in the chat as well. And this has recruitment resources, including sample social media posts here, a sample, 50, 75 word newsletter blurb, location-based recruitment emails, some like general English language graphics, a fun GIF and meme library, a customizable graphics maker. So like tons of information, a Poll Working 101 slide deck. So if you do a presentation like this, you'll recognize some of the slides that you saw me share with you. So that is something that we just try to make as streamlined and easy as possible for folks to support with recruitment. So that is a ton of information. So I'm going to go ahead and stop there, and I'm more than happy to open it up to any questions that folks have. I didn't see any additional ones in the chat, but if you have questions, feel free to use the raise hand function, and I will, or drop a question in the chat, and I will do my best to answer them. And we'll have Anthony's slides come back up as questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Marta. I really appreciate everything that you shared there. Oh, there we go, moving there. So we did have some questions that came in. And then also, as part of our registration process, we allow registrants to share questions there as well. So I just want to bring up some of those that some of you in the audience had shared previously. One thing I do want to just touch on quickly is, since we were most recently on the bilingual toolkit, and as you mentioned, if there are any maybe edits or things of that sort that someone might suggest, along that line, if there is a language that is not listed, and you've got 11 there, which is amazing, but if there are additional languages, and someone's in a community where they have a large population of people that speak a language that's not on there, and they want to request that, or just say like, hey, is that something that can be worked on? Is there a specific, I think it's probably on there, there's a communication email, but should they just reach out to the contact information that's on there to request that? Can you talk a little bit about what that process might be?
Absolutely. Yes, I'd say with any kind of questions or comments, email partners@powerthepolls.org. And then Ellen or I or someone else from the team will get back to you and kind of direct your call. Or direct your question. I would say I am hoping to do another batch of recruitment translations sometime this summer. Although we will likely do like a batch at a time. I mean, my ideal would be that we have those materials for all 25 languages that we recruit for, and it's probably even more than that at this point. So I would say, number one, please do reach out and let us know, and we'll like add it to the queue and try to be communicative when translations are happening. And the other thing that I'll say is, like, we've had one or two partners say like, hey, we have someone in-house who translates like, one or two of the languages, or like one or two of the statements into this other language that you don't have yet. If we send you the translation, can you make the pretty graphic? And that we can absolutely do. And then we can, always add that to the toolkit as well. So if there's a language on there that you like, Russian, for example, is like one that comes to mind that's not included and that someone had reached out about. So if you have like an in-house like Russian translator who will maybe just say like, we need Russian speaking poll workers, like we can make that into a graphic for you pretty easily as like a short-term kind of stopgap. And the other thing I would say is you can use our customizable graphics maker that is linked in the toolkit to add in kind of your own text in whatever language. It doesn't have to be in English. So those are a couple of like short-term solution ways. And then longer term, like please do send us the requests and we'll add that to the list.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that. I really appreciate it. I should have noted this before I started speaking as well, but I do want to apologize to everyone. I'm glad that you see the slide. I'm glad you see Marta. I am not on because my laptop has chosen to not allow my camera to work. So my apologies to everyone about that. But I'm certainly here to work with you all. But thank you for your patience as I work through that. I do want to take some other questions, but I also want to make sure that everyone does understand because a number of the participants today are members of our Welcoming Network. And the information that you are learning here, the link that you can use to go and sign up for this, you are more than welcome. In fact, please do share this within your community, within your network. You are a member of the Welcoming America Network. So the fact that that link extends to Welcoming America, that is yours as well as a member. So please do use that. It's a wonderful way to get individuals involved in the whole civic process within your local communities. So please, by all means, do that. The other thing to mention too is I probably be working with Marta on the back end and her team because we're able to track some of the data as people start using that. And so we'll be able to see where those are coming in from. One thing I would like to just, Marta, if you can talk a little bit about too, is, as you mentioned, this is pretty much applicable to any location, but we do have a number of our members who are from smaller communities and rural areas. And I want to make sure that they know that this also applies to them, that they're very much encouraged. And we know that the need there, our members there have very limited resources. And so we want to make sure that they know that this is something that they can turn to as well.
Absolutely. I would say, there are larger cities and counties that, need 3,000 new poll workers every single election. There are smaller counties for whom 12 new people is like huge and like transformational for them. So we actually work with a lot of smaller jurisdictions. Like there was one jurisdiction in like rural Northern California in 2022 where on poll worker recruitment day, or like the week of poll worker recruitment day, they got 20 new applications. And we got a phone call from that election administrator saying, oh my gosh, like, where did you find these 20 people? This is a transformative game changer for me in this election because the community is so small and rural that like 20 people just like made her day. She was effusive with gratitude. So I would say for folks in smaller communities, it is just as important and arguably kind of proportion wise, it could even be like a bigger impact, right? If you get 5 people who are, ready, willing, reliable, eager to sign up and to show up and serve, that can be a huge difference for the local election administrator.
Excellent. Thank you. That is very exciting. And I'm sure a number of people are going to be very excited to hear about that. So thank you for that. I have some other questions here that came up through the registration process and kind of tied, the first one here tied to actually registering to become a poll worker. And it came up a little bit of a reference to the question itself is because of, unfortunately, a lot of individuals who are of immigrant background, there is that fear and the intimidation and also providing information on themselves through some sort of an online registration portal or what have you. So going to that to register as a poll worker, can you talk a little bit about what specific information might be requested on that form and how that is kept and, made sure that it is secure?
Absolutely. Well, I will say from Power the Polls, from the Power the Polls perspective, we only ask for name, email, phone number, and zip code, and we keep that all like Loctite confidential, like that only is for uses for poll workers. So in some places where we can, what we may do is send that list of potential poll workers directly to the local election administrator, who's the one that you would be connected with anyway. When you complete your application, but all of that is like only used for poll worker recruitment. When you complete the poll worker application, so, you sign up for Power the Polls, we redirect you to your local poll worker application, and then that information goes directly to your local elections office. They will be asking more information. In some places, they will ask what your address is or what your zip code is, so they can know like which part of town you're in. So hopefully like match you with a place closer to where you live, with a polling place closer to where you live. In some, and again, it varies like pretty widely. So in some places they might ask for like your date of birth. In some places they'll ask for like your language, like what other languages you speak. I've seen some that ask for like a driver's license or some other form of identification. But I would say if there's anything that they ask that you don't have or like don't want to share, you can always call them directly. Because the other thing is when you sign up for Power the Polls, we will give you the contact information for your local election office. And you can always call or email them directly and say, hey, like, do you really need this piece of information? And they might say like, oh, no, we don't actually need that. But all of that information, like the election, the application is housed with your local elections office, and all that information goes straight to them.
Excellent. All right. Thank you so much for that. Because we've had that question also come up in some other instances. So I just want to make sure that we got to that there. I want to be respectful of time too. So I think we've got time maybe for one more question. And again, this is one that came in through the registration process, also tied to, I would imagine, procedures that are different from location to location. But the question is, can poll workers legally conduct poll worker interactions in a language other than English? So, if someone is there that speaks Spanish and they, need some sort of guidance in Spanish, is it okay to do that? Is that, again, more of a local kind of, maybe when they're going through training, bring that up, ask that question, or do you know if there's kind of a general blanket answer to that?
Yeah, not being a lawyer myself,
Yep.
I am pretty sure the answer is yes. I will say that election administrators usually, when they want poll workers who speak another language, they usually want English proficiency as well. So it's like really looking for bilingual poll workers who can, be trained, they'll probably be trained in English and then be able to like translate for voters who don't speak English. So really kind of being that go-between. But I mean, similarly to how, jurisdictions often print ballots. I mean, I think, San Francisco County prints ballots in like 14 different languages, right? And you like can request any of those. Poll workers help voters in any language, right? Because if a voter doesn't speak English, they will need assistance in a language that's not English. So like, yes, that is part of, making voting accessible, like making sure that every voter can access their ballot and make an informed choice and cast their vote accordingly. Does that
Got it.
answer the question, Anthony?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
And I know that's one of those that's, kind of a difficult one to give a definitive answer on, but it totally makes sense because, everyone wants to probably have that bilingual capability at a polling location. So that's going to be key. So I think that's great.
Yeah, I would say as far as I know, I am sure, well, as far as I know, the jurisdictions themselves train poll workers in English. And then, yeah,
Mhm.
so as I said, kind of being able to have that English interaction, and then also for the poll worker, then being able to assist voters who speak other languages.
Correct. Yeah,
Yeah.
perfect. Thank you so much. Well, again, I do want to stay respectful of time. And so we're going to go ahead and wind it up here. But as we do, again, Marta, thank you so much for sharing your time and the information here with us today. To all of you joining us, just a couple of quick reminders. This webinar is being recorded. So you will receive the recording next couple of days, maybe 3 days, but we'll get it to you as soon as possible. Included in that will be all of the links that have been referenced here today. So you will get that. Also, to those of you that are members of the Welcoming Network, as you know, we send out a post through the member forum every Wednesday. We will make sure that the sign up link is included in there as well weekly. So if you want to, again, share that out within your own community, please feel free to do that. You can get it from the member forum. I also wanted to just bring attention to, as I mentioned at the beginning, this is the first in our series of election webinars that we're going to be holding over the next few months. Our next webinar in the series is going to be on Wednesday, May 29th, also at 2 p.m. Eastern, just like today's. And that one is going to be Get Out the Vote, Strategies for Effective Voter Engagement and Mobilization. On this webinar, we will have speakers from a member of the Welcoming Network, someone from Montgomery County, Maryland, as well as someone from our partner, also additional partner, Nonprofit Vote. And they're going to be sharing resources as well as firsthand real life examples of things that they have done to really engage immigrant voter education, also methods for countering voter suppression and disenfranchisement, and just encouraging voter registration and maximizing that voter turnout. So I hope you will join us for that one. Also on the follow-up email, I'll be including the link to register for that webinar as well. So hopefully you can join us there. So again, thank you all for joining us today. We really appreciate you taking time out of your day to be with us. If you don't already follow us on our various social channels and on our website, you can see those listed here. I invite you to please do that. Once again, thank you for joining us. We encourage you to share this information within your community. We hope that this is helpful for you. If you have any additional questions, if you are looking for additional content or information related to this election cycle that's coming up, please let us know. We want to make sure that we're providing you the information that you need out in your community. So we encourage you to keep us posted on what you're looking for. So thank you again, everyone, for joining. Have a great rest of your day and a great rest of your week, and we will talk to you soon. Take care.